Imagine you're the most powerful man on earth. You've conquered half the known world. You've rebuilt the greatest cathedral ever constructed. You've rewritten the laws that govern civilization. Now imagine that while you did all of this, while you were building monuments to eternity, a plague was silently killing half your empire. Your generals were destroying each other. Your treasury was bleeding dry. The territory you conquered was slipping away. Everything you built, everything you achieved, everything you believed would make you immortal, falling apart. In your lifetime, under your watch. What does that do to a man's mind? This is the story of Justinian I, the Byzantine emperor who tried harder than anyone to save the Roman Empire, and watched it slip through his fingers anyway, not because he wasn't brilliant, not because he didn't try, but because some problems are simply too big for any single man to solve. This is the story of what happens when greatness isn't enough. The man who would restore Rome. Justinian became emperor in 527 AD. He burned with a vision that bordered on obsession. He would restore the Roman Empire to its former glory. Not just the Eastern Empire, the whole thing. Rome, Italy, North Africa, Spain, everything the West had lost. Most emperors had accepted reality. The West was gone. The East would survive alone. Justinian rejected that reality. And for a while, he was right. His general Belisarius conquered the Vandal kingdom in North Africa in just 2 years. Then they turned to Italy. The Ostrogothic kingdom fell. Rome itself was recaptured. The Eternal City, back under Roman control for the first time in decades. By 535 AD, Justinian had conquered more territory than any emperor in a century. He had done the impossible, or so it seemed. The cathedral that reached for God. While his generals conquered, Justinian built the Hagia Sophia, the greatest cathedral ever constructed. A dome so massive, so perfectly engineered, that when it was completed in 537 AD, Justinian reportedly said, "I have surpassed Solomon." The dome appeared to float above the nave, suspended by light, streaming through windows as if held up by the hand of God. It wasn't just architecture, it was theology made stone, a declaration that Byzantine civilization was divinely ordained to last forever. Justinian believed it. Standing in that cathedral, watching light pour through the dome, he must have believed he'd won. The plague arrives. In 541 AD, the Justinianic Plague arrived in Constantinople, bubonic plague. The same disease that would return as the Black Death 800 years later. It killed 10,000 people per day at its peak. Justinian himself got sick. He survived. But he watched his city die. Bodies piled in the streets. Ships were loaded with corpses and pushed out to sea. The plague didn't just kill people, it killed the economy. Tax revenue collapsed, trade stopped, the army was decimated. Justinian had spent decades building the most powerful empire on earth. The plague destroyed it in years, not through invasion, not through military defeat, through biology, the wars that drained everything. The conquest of Italy wasn't the quick victory Justinian had imagined. The Gothic Wars lasted 20 years of fighting, bleeding, spending, the treasury emptied. Meanwhile, Persia attacked repeatedly, fighting on 2 fronts simultaneously. Already weakened by plague, the empire was exhausted. By the 550s, the territory he'd conquered was slipping away. Italy was devastated, its population shattered, its cities destroyed. He had restored Rome, but in doing so, he had broken the empire that was supposed to hold it. The man behind the emperor. Here's what haunts Justinian's story. He never stopped believing. While the empire crumbled, he kept building. He kept legislating. He kept planning. He rewrote Roman law, the Corpus Juris Civilis, creating a legal framework that would influence Western civilization for 1,000 years. He never admitted defeat, never acknowledged that his grand vision had failed. This is the psychology of absolute power. When you believe you can reshape the world, every setback becomes temporary. Every failure becomes a problem to be solved. Justinian couldn't separate himself from the empire. The empire's glory was his glory. The empire's failure was his failure, so he refused to acknowledge failure. He kept fighting, he kept building, he kept believing, even as everything he'd built started to disappear. The weight of legacy. Justinian died in 565 AD. He was 83, extraordinarily old for a Byzantine emperor. In 38 years he had conquered North Africa and Italy, built the Hagia Sophia, rewritten Roman law, survived the plague, and watched his empire begin its long decline. The territory he'd conquered was mostly lost within a generation. Italy, the prize, the symbol, the proof that Rome could be restored, was conquered again by the Lombards just 8 years after his death. Everything he'd fought for, gone. But his legacy survived. The Hagia Sophia still stands. The legal code he created still influences courts today. Justinian didn't save Rome, but he kept the dream alive long enough for it to echo through the centuries, the psychology of impossible goals. Justinian set an impossible goal: restore the Roman Empire, too big, too ambitious, beyond what any single ruler could achieve, but that's exactly why he did it. Not because he was naive, because he understood something most leaders don't. If you aim for the possible, you achieve the ordinary. If you aim for the impossible, you might fail, but your failure might be greater than someone else's success. Justinian failed to restore Rome, but in failing, he conquered continents. He built the greatest cathedral on earth. He created a legal system that shaped Western civilization. His failure was extraordinary, more impressive than the success of a dozen emperors who played it safe. The lesson: was Justinian's ambition a curse or a gift? If success means achieving your goal, he failed completely. If success means leaving the world different than you found it, he succeeded beyond measure. He kept pushing, he kept building, he kept believing the empire could be saved. Not because he was delusional, but because the alternative, accepting decline, letting Rome fade quietly, was unbearable. Some men are born to push against the impossible, not because they'll win, but because the pushing itself is what makes them great. Justinian pushed harder than anyone, and the world is still shaped by what he built while he was losing. The emperor who tried to save an empire and lost everything, but left behind a world that remembers his name, not as a failure, as a man who refused to accept that greatness had limits.